You're watching WBIN, the home of NH1 News.
Athletes get the press and all of the big money, but it's the business minds behind the scenes that are often instrumental to their financial success. How can you help your team win off the field? Today we'll talk naming rights, corporate sponsorship, strategic planning, and taking your sports dreams all the way to China.
Ever dream of getting paid to wear your favorite sports logo? Can sports impact business as well as athletes? And a poor American kid moves from the projects to become a sports maven in China. But first, how an agent signs an athlete. All coming up on this episode of The Language of Business.
Professional athletes are fun to watch, and the best ones make millions. But who looks after the fine print of their contracts? Joe Rosen represents professional ball players. Welcome to The Language of Business, Joe.
Hi, how are you, Greg?
So how did you find your first client?
I was a lawyer at a big firm in Boston, Goulston & Stores, and I made the decision that this is what I was going to do. I had developed the sports practice at Goulston for a number of years, wanted to do the player representation side, and approached the managing partner at Goulston about it, but it was really something that the fee structure didn't work in a big firm. So I went out on my own, and that was the big question. It was like, how am I going to find my first client? And I got a call from a buddy of mine who I went to law school with. This was about a month after I had started doing this. I said, well, how do you do it? Do you just go up and say hi and I'm Joe and I'd like to represent you and that's.
Or do you often play catch with them?
Pretty much. They wouldn't want to play catch with me. So I did, and I talked to, and he said, yeah, that's really what you do. So the first professional player who I represented was a player named Ryan Shaver. The player's mother called my friend and said, hey, I'd like you to represent my son, just out of the blue. And my friend said, I can't really do this. He had been doing it for 10 years. This was a really young rookie ball player who had just signed out of junior college. And my friend called me and said, hey, I got a player for you if you want to represent him. And I said, absolutely, 100%. And I flew down to Arizona in July when it was about 140 degrees, and I signed him, and that was awesome.
What does it mean, though, for the benefit of our viewers to represent a player? That doesn't necessarily mean the player is going to make it, but you are, quote-unquote, representing them, right?
If you're representing an amateur player, a high school player or a college player, that's what's called, advising that player. And there's limits on what you can do. The NCAA limits what you can do, but the NCAA specifically allows high school and college players to have legal advisors, and you can help them and give them information about their draft prospects and things like that. So that's sort of the advising stage. So you're representing a player, but there can't be a written contract, so it's a very different thing. Representing a professional player, there's a lot of things that come into it. Helping them negotiate contracts. In professional baseball, until you get to the major leagues, the contracts don't occur that often. You usually have one minor league contract, and hopefully you'll never have another minor league contract.
Sure, because they're going to make it to the big leagues, right?
Exactly. So there is obviously a lot of contract work, but there's other things that come into it. As their agent, I mean, that's what representing a player means. You're taking care of their equipment deals. If you can't get them an equipment deal, you're taking care of their equipment. You're purchasing their equipment for them. You're helping them find a trainer. You're helping them with, I don't do financial advice or tax, but I have relationships with people that I'll make introductions, or I'll help them make their selection of those people.
How many athletes do you feel comfortable representing?
I think my maximum for me personally would be between 30 and 35. I'm less than that right now. I like 25 to 30. That's always been the number that I feel comfortable with. You want a certain amount of guys in the big leagues, you want a certain amount of guys in the high levels of the minor leagues, and you want a certain number of draft guys and things like that.
Who have been some of your more notable players that you've represented?
Well, I represented Hideki Okajima when he was with the Red Sox for a number of years. I've worked with Brandon Moss. I've had 7 players in the big leagues in the 10 years that I've done this. So, those are probably the 2 bigger names that you've heard of. Eric Ferris, Ryan Reed is a client of mine. He's with the Mets now. He was with the Pirates in the big leagues last year. So I've had a number of guys up there. I've had first-round picks. I've had top 5-round picks just about every year, except my first draft. It's been good. And now the recruiting side, it comes to me a little more than I have to go to them.
Market forces notwithstanding, are the high salaries justified?
Absolutely, 100%. And I'll say this, once you get to the big leagues, the first 3 years, and this is generalization, your first 3 years, you're under the complete control of the team. They set your salaries. Your next 3 years, and they're Super 2s, right, if you're in the top percentage, but years 4, 5, and 6, you're in arbitration. And during arbitration, you have to sign with your team if they want you to, but they can't set the salary anymore. It's based on what similar players in similar circumstances have done. So only after 6 years are you a free agent. I mean, think about that. So if you get to the big leagues when you're 28 or 30 and you do well, you're not a free agent until you're 34 or you're 35.
Nobody's going to want you.
Right. You got to get as much as you can when you can, and this is the way the system is, so it works.
Thanks, Joe.
Coming up, can sports impact business as well as athletes? And a poor American kid moves from the projects to become a sports maven in China. But first, ever dream of getting paid to wear your favorite sports logo? You're watching The Language of Business with Greg Stoller.
Do the fancy logos athletes wear really convince you to buy their products? Jay Fee says yes. He's a partner at the law firm of Nelson, Mullins, Riley & Scarborough, LLP, and a chair of the sports business law practice. Jay, welcome to The Language of Business.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
So how did you come to specialize in sports business law?
Quite by accident. I was a corporate lawyer by training, and it came to be that one day a famous hockey player came in our office. He had a problem with a restaurant deal that had gone south. His name was Cam Neely. He was a superstar with the Boston Bruins at the time. I helped him out of that mess. And then
Few people might know him around these parts.
Yes,
right?
currently the president of the Boston Bruins.
Of course.
And then he said, why don't you go down there and negotiate my contract with Harry Sinden? So quite by accident, that's how I got started.
And besides Cam Neely, who are some of your other well-known clients?
Well, over the years, I've represented over 250 NHL players and some baseball players. But Grant Fuhr was a Hall of Fame goalie, 5 Stanley Cups, and local players around here like Mike Greer, for example, who actually lives here in your locale. And so it's been an enjoyable way to practice law in the sports world.
What's the breakdown between sponsorship versus transactional work, etc.?
Presently at Nelson Mullins, I chair the sports industry practice group, and a lot of my day is transactional-based law, and that's involving the representation of corporations, colleges and universities. It could be individual celebrities or athletes that have been approached by companies to be part of their marketing plans. So a vast majority of my time is spent on that type of thing. I also represent a major corporation that does a lot of sports marketing in a global sense, so we're active with big properties such as the NFL and the PGA Tour.
When it comes to sponsorship, how is a company able to calculate its return on investment?
It's a good question. For years, it was throw a sign on a wall, hope people saw it, hope people bought your product. Now with technology, the metrics of measurement are tremendous. For example, they can run a sweepstakes, they can have surveys, all those metrics are counted. In addition, if there's a call to action by a celebrity endorser, they'll immediately cover and determine how many click-throughs to the company's website or product-specific targets were made by that potential customer for the product that the endorser is pushing. The metrics have gotten tremendously more sophisticated, and they spend their dollars much more wisely.
What trends are you seeing in your industry practice?
Technology is a good example of something that I see all the time, and I think to some degree law is trying to catch up with technology. The companies want social media because it's a good, efficient way to get to consumers. A lot of times they're looking at how many followers they have on social media, Twitter, Facebook impressions, etc. The companies want to monitor the actions, the statements, etc. of their celebrities. So, you could have an unrelated tweet go out from a particular celebrity that may be relatively damaging to the brand. And that's another really important thing that I see all the time, is when we go into these large sponsorships, whether it be with teams, leagues, or individuals, companies are concerned about protecting their brand. They say, Jay, if something goes wrong, we need to distance ourselves and do it promptly and efficiently and answer the questions later. So the brand is the single most important thing that they're after by way of protections.
Even on your personal Hotmail or Gmail account?
I would not write anything on a personal account that I didn't want to see in the press. This is the day and age we live in. And I learned a long time ago there are really no such thing as off the record sometimes when you're dealing with reporters. And particularly now in today's day and age of how media, particularly in the sports, the overheated world of sports and entertainment, everybody's looking for an angle. And so less and less do I engage in off-the-record conversations.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Jay Fee a partner at the law firm of Nelson, Mullins, Riley & Scarborough, LLP, and a chair of the Business Industry Sports Law Practice.
On this episode of The Language of Business, we're looking at the business of sports. Coming up, a poor American kid moves from the projects to become a sports maven in China. But first, can sports impact business as well as athletes? As The Language of Business continues.
How do you merge sport-specific goals with overarching business objectives? After stints with Nike, Pepsi, and J&J, Dave Minji is now honing his skills with his own company, The Glide Slope. Joining us from New York, Dave, welcome to The Language of Business.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on.
What does the company's name, The Glide Slope, mean?
Glide slope technically is an aeronautical term. It means the proper path an aircraft has to take to meet its landing point. And so a little bit of a metaphor, a theoretical kind of point of view on the sports industry is that we feel there's a lot of planes out there that are circling, if you will, and up flying high in the air who might not necessarily have the right approach to the proper business results they're searching for in the space of sport. So we tended to see ourselves as the handful of consultants, if you will, in the air traffic control tower. Now, so if you think about a glide slope, if you're above it, you overshoot the target. If you're below the proper path, obviously you're probably going to ditch into the dirt. And we want to make sure that our clients have the right approach and the right angle on attack for using the sports industry to affect their bottom line growth.
So what types of clients do you service?
You know, it's sort of an interesting offering for us at Glide Slope that we don't traditionally go after the large sports companies. Our main focus is those businesses whose core is not sport, what we tend to call the non-endemic. So if you think of large financial institutions, healthcare companies, automotive manufacturers, for us it's not really about the Nikes and the Red Bulls of the world. It's more about those businesses whose core, as I said, is not sport, but increasingly are starting to turn to sport as a marketing tool to increase their bottom line.
What does a typical client engagement look like?
Our typical engagement might surprise you a bit, particularly because of where we start out. So for us, when we walk into a client, we're not immediately talking about the excitement of sport. We simply sit back and ask the client a series of questions first that lead us on a longer path to understand what's keeping them up at night. Because as we simply say at Glide Slope, there's no point in using sport, especially considering how expensive it can be around the world, if there's not a direct strategic approach on how it's going to help a company do what they're already trying to do. So again, keep in mind that we're with the non-endemics. So we want to know what a company's focused on. Is it greater retail penetration? Do they have an HR employee and retention problem? Perhaps around the world they might have some government relations issues or are working on some trade and tariff or trying to introduce new innovation for products in new markets. That's most important. And we believe it's very easy to get intoxicated by the sexiness of sport and all the glamour that comes along with it. And we want to make sure, number one, that our clients never lose sight that sport is only a tool to be used to affect to a positive degree what they're already trying to do. So our typical engagement starts with that type of alignment, making sure the executives understand exactly what they hope sport should accomplish for the company, and then moving into a strategic development to align to that goal, and then pulsing them through several series of steps to get all the way to the point of an activation. But then, most importantly, don't stop there. The key point at the end is to measure, and then, as we say, rinse and repeat, and go back to the first step. So once you measure how effective sport has been, let's categorize that in a way that the executives who set up the alignment can digest whether this is truly working, and hopefully, if it is, in what way can we increase to be even more successful moving forward.
What types of companies compete with you?
In launching Glide Slope, we often got asked about competitors to our offering, and what we like to say is that we really don't believe there's many people out there doing what we do. First and foremost, we come at it with a heavy analytics and insights effort. We really want to understand data to find insights that deliver foresights to our businesses. But specifically in the industry that we call sports marketing or global sports marketing, there certainly are many players that have global consultancies. However, most of those are laddered up to a larger company or even to a holding company family of operating units. And what you tend to see is that they will also often be associated with elements of those companies that represent athletes, that sell property rights, and kind of play both sides of the table, if you will. We thought it was very important in launching Glide Slope that we were independent and neutral in only brand side. So for us, starting with analytics and insights, we obsess on strategic efforts that can move a business forward, but only done so in an objective, free from conflict kind of way. And we believe that offering not only is new to the industry, but is also going to be the most effective way that businesses can truly leverage sport moving forward, simply focused on their business goals and understanding how sport can drive unique benefit if done well on a strategic platform.
Thanks, Dave. Dave Minji, president and founding partner of The Glide Slope.
Coming up, a poor American kid moves from the projects to become a sports maven in China when the language of business continues. You're watching The Language of Business with Greg Stoller.
A kid from Roxbury works his way out of the housing projects and gets into Boston College. From there, he becomes fascinated with sporting event management. Except not here, in China. The big question is, when he speaks Chinese, does he do so with a Boston accent? Tom McCarthy, welcome to The Language of Business.
Thank you very much, Greg. Pleasure to be here.
You've been in Asia since 1987. What caused you to go over?
Well, basically, I come out of the coaching business at the collegiate level and moved into a shoe business company called Etonic, which is very famous down in Brockton, and became the vice president of sourcing, and all these trips back and forth every month got a little expensive for the company. So I landed in Hong Kong in, I think, 1987, started visiting and moved in 1991. And bumped into a guy that got hired from the Denver Nuggets when Rupert Murdoch bought Star TV.
Sure.
And what happened was they invited me to take your seat. And I became the voice of the NBA for 3 years when they first hit Asia, a 53-country network. So from there, then I got invited to run basketball for Asia, which is now FIBA Asia. So
Sure.
I looked over 44 countries and slowly but surely made my way towards the Middle Kingdom.
When did you transition from Hong Kong to mainland China?
I moved out of FIBA Asia, or the Asian Basketball Confederation, in end of 2001, and made the decision that China was actually bigger than Asia in terms of the development of sports. So I started a company with a lady, Lin Xiaowu, who is still with me to today, and we've had 2 or 3 companies along the way.
And what did the company do?
Our company now is what we would call a boutique sports event management and consultant company. So our main objective is to identify either growing sports, and for me, I like to be on the front end of things.
Sure.
So we moved from baseball into tennis and got very fortunate that Li Na and Junji and players like that came out and won Grand Slam championships. And then at the same time, we had purchased all the rights for the China national tennis team.
Talk to us about your business model. Is it ticket sales, is it commission deals, or all of the above?
We are primarily sponsorship driven because we don't own the facilities. And being a boutique company, we're not operating in the sphere like AEG or IMG,
Sure.
that are the big gorillas in the industry. They have tons of cash, so they go out and they buy the stadium and this thing. What we do is we do deals with stadiums on the professional tournament. The last couple of years we've been in Shenzhen, right across from the Hong Kong border. For the other things, it's more renting out facilities, tennis clubs, etc.
And so you're making money by sponsoring it, getting advertisers to contribute, you're renting out the stadium, the difference becomes your profit.
We purchase, and then to build the program, then we go out and identify title sponsor, presenting sponsor, official supplier, and go right down the list. And hopefully we accumulate enough money to pay the bills, and then have a nice little net profit coming out of there.
After 27 years, your biggest cultural problem you've encountered?
In China, there is a disease it's called the Nike effect. Put on my shoes and run at the first sign of danger, or at the first sign of a lot of profit can be grabbed. And this is a big danger. I've gone through I'm owed much more than I've made, I'm owed. I've had things like the Beijing Olympic Stadium. My rights, 10 years later, just ran out, yet I never participated in those rights because somebody on the side of the government sold them to David Stern and to AEG, to Tim Lewicki. So I had to decide, should I sue right before the Olympics and never do business again if I won, or turn the other way and go on and move on?
Are the margins better for what you do in the United States or in China?
Over the last few years, there's no doubt that everybody can make a lot more money in China than in the U.S., just on the salaries and things like that alone. As you get more and more into a business and doing something every year, the same thing, like a particular event or a program, you naturally learn where you're wasting time, because time is more important than money in some instances, and the money.
Basketball, baseball, other sports on your horizon?
We've just begun to do some golf with the China Golf Association. We always like to do things. We like to, number one, select a sport that is an Olympic sport, because in China, the Olympic sports get all the money from the government. Like baseball right now is out. When we bought them, we knew that they were going in, and right before they're going in, we bought the rights. So the rights value jumped up once they went in the Olympics, because now money's coming in from the government to help the association. So we try to, first of all, select an Olympic sport, and then second, you want to get into a sport that you think that there's upside. We got in on the front end of tennis, just after they won the gold medal in Greece, and right before the Zhengji and Yinze jumped out and won Wimbledon and Australian Open, Wimbledon, back to back. So right there, it gave a big jump start to tennis, and now people started to play, because anytime they see either an icon like Yao Ming, who we've done a lot of work with, or Lu Zhong, the runner, or now Li Na, who's basically want to come out of our system, everybody runs out and gives their kid a tennis racket or a basketball or a pair of track shoes, and oh yeah, you're going to be the next one. And so you have a rush that we would consider, if you did by percentages, very small. That's another thing in the United States they kind of can't get their head around. There's 1.4 billion people there. So if you move the needle by 1%, that's very, very big. There are a lot of people all of a sudden playing your sport. So our job is two things. We need to develop young kids to come in to fill national teams and win Grand Slams and all this. On the other thing, to make the base bigger with participation.
Tom, thank you.
Thank you.
Tom McCarthy, President and CEO of the Beijing International Group, where he certainly knows how to think big.
Thanks for watching The Language of Business with Greg Stoller, a weekly look at ways to encourage and inspire entrepreneurs. To see more anytime or to join the discussion, go to languageofbusiness.biz.